Let's get started. We're going to start with some breathing, as usual. So give yourself some space on your mat. Come down gradually, one disc, one vertebra at a time. If you happen to have blocks or bolsters that you can use, feel free. And if you're going to be supporting your hips, you'll want to have those props handy. Once you come all the way down onto your back, lengthen your spine as much as you can. Walk the feet toward you. Take the feet together and the knees wide. We try to push the soles of the feet together firmly, heels and toe mounds evenly. We can support our outer hips with blocks, as I say, either flat against the floor or out an angle like so. Or we can hang out. Let's go ahead and work with our arms right away. We're going to reach the fingers towards the ceiling, lengthening the arms. Create as much length as you can. And then this one we don't often do, as often as the elbow cross. So we'll cross the upper arms and then bring the palms toward the sides of the body. You might go toward the outer armpit or just below that area. You might go toward the shoulder blades, behind the back, depending on how long your arms are. You can either squeeze with the fingers and palms actively, squeezing the elbows into one another and taking both elbows away from the chin towards the chest and rib cage, or you can let the hands hang and dangle. If you prefer to let your arms be heavy beside you, feel free to do so. All of these are good options. Now take your mind to your abdomen. With each inhale, feel your abdomen expanding. With each exhale, feel your abdomen contracting. Continuously focusing on the movement of the abdomen, the movement of your breathing. And you can always add more or less support for those hips whenever you fancy. Lie down, Daisy. Abdomen expanding, abdomen contracting. 10 more breaths here. Perhaps you can feel the breath moving not only into the front of the body, but towards the sides and the lower back. When your 10 breaths are complete and there is no rush whatsoever, return to your natural breathing. And you can feel free to adjust the legs at any time. If the arms are crossed in front of you, go ahead and extend those fingers towards the ceiling. And switch the crossing, left arm on top as you bring your palms toward the outer shoulder. Maybe the outer armpit, a little bit below the armpit is nice. Maybe toward the shoulder blades. You can either squeeze with the fingers and palms, or you can let the hands dangle. You're resisting right elbow into left, pressing left elbow down into right, and taking both elbows away from the chin toward the chest and rib cage. Hi. And taking your mind to the ribs with each inhale. Feel the rib cage expanding out to the sides, up into space. With each exhalation, feel the rib cage contracting, lungs emptying. Continuously focusing on the movement of your lungs within the space of the rib cage. Lie down, sweetie. Come on, Daisy. Down. Just sit there. Okay. If your mind wanders, bring your attention back to the movement of the lungs, back to the movement of the rib cage. 10 more breaths, ribs filling, ribs emptying. Feel the entire rib cage expanding. Feel the entire rib cage contracting. With your next exhalation, returning to your natural breathing. If the arms are crossed in front of you, extend the arms, lengthen the fingers towards the ceiling, and rest the arms heavy beside you. You can stay one more round with the knees wide if you'd like. If it feels like too much, it probably is. Go ahead and bring those knees to touch and walk the feet apart, finding snowplow. And as I say, one more round's fine if you like, otherwise changing. If you change to snowplow, you're squeezing the thighs together, you're pulling the ankles apart, trying to lift the arches of the feet. You can rest the arms beside you, or you can continue to work the shoulders and lungs more so, reaching fingers towards ceiling, lengthening arms, taking right hand to left elbow, left hand to right, squeezing opposite elbows with the fingers and palms as you pull them apart. Try to have wrinkle-free wrists if you can. Equally engage with every digit, especially little fingers. Elbows lift to ceiling, upper arm bones sink to floor. Elbow push-ups, scapula push-ups. Then extension, no tension in your neck or jaw. Elbows toward legs, toward overhead. Be perfectly fine to explore some circles too. Make sure you do both directions if you choose to make circles. Keeping that resistance, pulling elbows apart as you squeeze with fingers and palms. And then eventually, elbows toward overhead. Perhaps they come to the forehead, maybe they hover overhead, maybe they rest on a block or a book or something that you place over the crown of the head like so. Lots of possibilities. You can always alter the position whenever you need. Taking your attention to the upper chest and shoulders, the upper back. With each inhale, feel the chest lifting, the shoulders expanding. Exhale to feel the chest sinking, shoulders contracting. See if you can feel the breath wrapping around toward the sides, toward the upper back. With each exhalation, following the contraction of the lungs with your mind. You can begin to think of the abdomen drawing in and up, the front ribs drawing together and toward the spine. If you wish to further isolate the breath into the upper chest and upper back. And this practice tends to strengthen the intercostal muscles, the muscles that wrap around the rib cage, or each of the ribs. In turn, makes it easier to expand and fully contract the lungs, allowing us to have more control over the lung tissue itself. And these days, that is a good thing, even more than usual. 10 more breaths. Chest lifting, upper back expanding, following the exhale. Returning to our natural breathing. Bring the elbows in front of you, lengthen the arms towards the ceiling, create space between the digits, rest the arms beside you. If you haven't yet done so, use your hands, support your knees, bring your knees to touch, walk the knees, have the knees touching, and walk the feet apart, outer edges of feet parallel, pigeon toeing. Or at least it'll feel like you're pigeon toeing. Just like so. Oh, I want to get your tail there, Daisy. Just like that. And then the knees and thighs squeeze, the ankles pull apart, and you're trying to lift the arch of the foot up away from the ground like that rather than letting it sink. Excuse me, Daisy. And then once again, you'll reach the fingers towards the ceiling, lengthening the arms, taking left hand to right elbow, right hand to left, squeezing opposite elbows with fingers and palms, finding elbow push-ups. Moving the humerus bone, the upper arm bone toward and away from the socket. Obviously it's in the socket regardless, but we're trying to create just a little more muscular engagement surrounding that socket. So we have more stability in the shoulder joint itself. An extension, no tension, elbows toward legs, toward overhead. If you fancied a few circles, feel free to do so. Just maintain that resistance, don't lose it. Going both ways if you choose to make rotations or circles here. And then elbows toward overhead. Maybe they come to the forehead. Maybe you have them hover over the crown of the head, slightly above the floor, on a block, a book, whatever you've got handy. And then attention goes to the lungs. Big inhale to fill the lungs, full exhalation to empty every last drop of air. And then inhaling to fill the abdomen. When the abdomen is full, breath spills to the rib cage. When the rib cage is full, breath spills to the upper chest and shoulders. And we empty the lungs from top to bottom. Continuing with a wave of breath up and down the spine. And hopefully you have a dog that's trying to sit on you right now, or a cat or something. Make it even more fun. Good time for yoga therapy, good time for pet therapy too. Not to mention gardening. Very good therapy also. And you can work on your breathing, your pranayama, when you're doing any of these things. Spending time with your animals, spending time in your garden, spending time on your mat. All of these things are an opportunity for us to become that much more present, to be here now. Three more deep breaths, filling the lungs from bottom to top. Emptying top to bottom. Here it is. Good. Natural breath. If the arms are overhead, bring them toward in front of you. Stretch the arms towards the ceiling. Let them be heavy. Stay, stay. Stay, stay. Then walk those knees and ankles to touch. Draw the knees toward your chest. If you're on some height, come off that height. Hands come to shins. Maybe you interlace the fingers. Daisy, come here. Come here. Maybe you use a strap over the shins. You can have one hand on each knee, whatever you like. Rocking side to side, lengthening lower back. Do you want me to free you? Do you want to run out? Go here. There you go. All right. And then circles. Trying to squeeze the knees and thighs together as you spread your toes apart. Changing direction now. Change the grip of the hands. And side to side. And coming back to center, take one hand behind each thigh or behind each knee. Take the knees a little bit wider so the knees are about as wide as your ribs. Push the thighs away from you. Pull the thighs toward you. Think elbows reaching a little bit wide. Inner upper arm toward ceiling. Outer upper arm toward the floor. You can press the elbows to the floor or have them hover. And then pulsing the thighs away from you, toward you, pubic bone away from you, toward you. Try to keep the bottom rib cage pressing toward the ground, especially if you're flexible in the body. Think front ribs to back. Think whole back rib cage pressing to the floor. Think outer hip, so hip crease area, dragging away from armpits. Let's do 3 more. Good, and then one hand on each knee, knees away from you, away from one another, toward you, toward one another, knees away from you, away from one another, toward you, toward one another. Let your pelvis move here as much as you like. Change direction now. Good, and stopping with the circles, bringing left foot to floor. Let's bring both feet to the floor. Actually, walk the knees and ankles to touch. Cross right leg tightly over left, so we've got no space between the thighs. We're squeezing the thighs, the knees, the ankles together. Maybe we can pull the thighs apart as well. Pubic bone lengthens away from you. Let's try just imprinting and arching a few times. Pubic bone lengthening, pubic bone lifting, tilting pelvis to you and away from you. If you find it hard to do this, walk the left foot farther away from you. If you find it easy, you can walk the foot a little closer if you like. It will make it harder to move this way. Good. And now I want you to think pubic bone lengthening away from you to hold. Fingers can be on the hip bones if you like. Think right hip away from right armpit, left hip away from left armpit. Shortening on right side, lengthening on left, shortening on right, going back and forth. Right hip closer to shoulder, left hip closer to shoulder. Back and forth. Couple more on each side, and then see if you can end up with those hip bones equal distance from the shoulders, equal distance from the floor. Last one, think more weight on right hip, more weight on left hip. Good. Couple more on each side. And then find as neutral a pelvis as you can to hold. Outer thighs squeezing, inner thighs pulling apart. Maybe you can pull the femurs toward the hip sockets. If that makes sense, maybe you can start to lift the sacrum. Who knows? Sounds like Greek, don't worry about it. If you want more, walk your left foot closer. If you want less, walk it farther away. If you want a little more still, you could add a block under your foot or a book or whatever you have handy. You can use hands or strap to bind. Let's move our ankles here, pointing and flexing, fixing the gaze on the ceiling or closing your eyes. Inner upper arm to ceiling, outer upper arm to the floor, pointing for circles, drawing O's with the toes. I think of drawing or squeezing my lower legs together as well here. Change direction, just as much as the thighs. And it gets into the hips even more when you find the lower legs and the ankles. Flex your feet, big toe mound, baby toe mounds level. No wrinkles in the ankles if you can, or the heels. Curl the toes, keeping the toes curled, point your feet. Keeping the feet pointed, flip the toes. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Once more. Great, and then flex your feet to hold. Try to get rid of any wrinkles in the heels or the front of the ankle if that's available to you, but it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Big toe mounds, baby toe mounds level. You can either hang out as you are with your foot on a block, wherever that block is. You can use your hands, hang out there, or you can do a little bit of, or build a little bit of heat, doing a bit of core here. It's kind of like hippie core. Good for the glutes, good for the hips, good for the lower back. That being said, no back pain, no pulling, no tugging, nothing like that. If you feel that, do less. So you push into your arms, palms pushing into ground, outer shoulder pushing to ground, inner upper arm to ceiling. You're not letting your shoulders float, but you're keeping them firm. You're alternating thighs toward you, left heel tapping on floor. Thighs toward you, left heel taps on floor. And right hip can lengthen away from right armpit a little bit more if possible. Chances are this will be sufficient for most of us. If we need more, we can try to lift up the pelvis a little bit. It's tricky, but it's possible. You need to think of squeezing the legs together and drawing the thighs and the abdomen and the ribs as close to one another as possible. Another option still would be to interlace the hands at the base of the skull. If you knew you could control the legs here and the shoulders, you would want your elbows as wide as your shoulders. You're squeezing them together, you're pulling them apart. And then you can choose to lift the head, neck, and shoulders slightly to hold perhaps, but you're not letting the chin tuck. You're keeping a neutral cervical curve. Or you could perhaps go up and down, whatever you fancy. But whatever you do, you want to maintain that neutral curve in the neck, right? So if I were to tuck my chin as I came up, I would be doing myself a disservice. It would be best to keep that neck neutral and move at the mid-back. Right? Got 10 more breaths to move or to be still. Thinking right hip away from right armpit here. Squeezing the legs. Very good, and then left foot comes to floor. Slide the right ankle to the left knee. Right foot is flexed. You're lengthening inner groin to inner knee. Inner knee lengthens to inner ankles. We're pulling the femurs toward the hip sockets. We're squeezing the outer trochanter towards one another. I like to think of drawing my right sit bone toward my left and then pulling the sit bones apart. If you need more, you think of continuing to lengthen the right inner groin, right inner knee away from you, not letting it come toward you. Maybe walking the left foot closer, keeping the pubic bone lengthening, keeping the hip bones equal distance from the shoulders and the floor. You can lift your heel. You can add a block under your foot. If you happen to have a block or a book, whatever you like is great. Lifting the toes or lifting the sole of the foot is a nice option. Or you can use hands or strap for binding. If you use the strap, then you have the ability to rest the elbows on the floor, which can be really nice, depending on how you're feeling. Whatever option you select, you want to be pain-free, and you want it to be a moderate effort. Concentrate on your breathing. By far the most important aspect of any asana is breath and alignment, of course. Just 10 more deep breaths. And left foot coming back to ground. Draw the right knee toward you. You can take your hands behind your thigh, your strap behind your thigh, pushing thigh away from you, thinking inner upper arm to ceiling, outer upper arm to floor to straighten the right knee. And you can straighten as much as you like, do not force. Left leg can be straight or bent, not important. A little bit of a bend in the knees is really useful if you're hypermobile. You want to keep them so they feel bent for quite a while usually. Then before you know it, the muscles will become a lot denser, a lot stronger, and it'll make a big difference in joint stability. 10 more breaths, pressing the thigh away from you into the hands or the strap, drawing the upper arm bones toward the sockets and finding that external rotation of the upper arm. Maybe the elbows pull apart if you feel there is space. And you can feel free to move your right ankle here again if you'd like, or you can stay still. Both have value. Circles if you fancy it. Go the other way if you're rotating. And flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Release your hands now. Lower the right leg to the floor. Bend your knees. Have the knees and ankles together in line with pubic bone. Cross left leg over right. No space between thighs. Think of squeezing the thighs, knees, and ankles together. Spreading the toes. Pubic bone lengthens away from you. And then we imprint. Imprinting, arching. Imprinting, arching. Right foot farther away from you to create more space if needed. And similar to sitting in any kind of cross-legged position or any kind of seated position really, but cross-legged is particularly useful. And working through the three neutral pelvis movements, where we try to get the hips or different distances from the shoulders, different distances from the front and back of the spine and so on, depending on how much curve we have in the lumbar as well. These variables, when we move around in the context of one of these postures, it can be incredibly useful for freeing up some of the tighter bits of the hips. It also brings better proprioception or awareness of the body. Next movement, which hip is closer to which armpit? Right hip away from our right armpit, left hip away from left armpit, going back and forth. Shortening on one side, lengthening on the other. And finally, right hip closer to floor, left hip closer to floor. More weight on right hip, more weight on left. Right side to sacrum, left side. And then see if you can tie all three together, lengthening pubic bone away from you, left hip away from left armpit until the hip bones are equal distance from the shoulders. And then no more weight in right hip than left. Often more weight will sink to the right on this side. If you need more, you walk your foot closer. If you need less, walk it farther away. You can add a block under your foot. You can use your hands or your strap to bind. If you've got a strap, you can have your elbows on the floor, which is nice. And you don't need a yoga strap. You can use whatever you have that's long and not too stretchy. Pointing and flexing ankles. Thighs squeezing, legs pulling apart. Maybe you can squeeze the lower legs and ankles together and pull them apart. Circles. Go the other way. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping once more. Great, flex to hold. Try to get rid of heel wrinkles, ankle wrinkles if you can. Either stay as you are, foot on floor, foot on block, using hand strap, or you can add a little bit of leg lifting. Options are arms on ground, lifting and lowering, tapping heel on floor, and then thighs coming to navel. We're not letting that left hip come toward our armpit, but we're lengthening the left hip away from the left armpit, trying to keep equal length on both sides of the body. You can start to lift the tailbone a little bit if you like. It's a good challenge. You're not letting your shoulders leave the floor in that case. If you can keep the shoulders on the floor, a second or a third option for you. Be hands interlaced, left thumb and forefinger on top at the base of the skull. The elbows would be as wide as the shoulders, not closer, not wider, but just as wide, as though you had a little stick between your elbows you were trying to squeeze and equally drop. You could hang out with the head on the ground. You could lift and lower the legs this way. You could lift up the legs and the head. You could hold the head up and do the leg lifts, whatever you like. Whatever option you choose, you're not changing the neck, so we're not tucking the chin like this. Rather, we're keeping a neutral cervical curve. So there's a lift in the chin as though you had like a really small apple or orange under your chin. You've got 10 more breaths to play with it. You can always hold up too if you like. Lots of options there. Most important aspect is that you are able to move your lung tissue. If you're not able to breathe easily, well, moderately easily, less is more, especially when we're dealing with a lot of external stress. Good, and then right foot coming back to floor when you're ready. Slide the left ankle to the right knee, foot is flexed, hip bones equal distance from shoulders and floor, lengthening left inner groin away from you, and you can try hinging that left knee to and away from you a few times if you're not sure, and then keep it away from you. Don't let it come closer to you if you walk the right foot toward you. If it does, better to go back a stage and focus on this left leg being under your cognitive control before you do more. Pubic bone lengthens, hip bones equal distance from shoulders and floor. You can walk your foot closer if you need more. You can lift the heel. You can add a block, but see, we don't let the left leg come closer. We keep that engagement. We can use hands or strap behind thigh. Lots of possibilities depending on what feels good. We're not letting, we're not letting the weight sink to the left. We're keeping the weight distribution level. We're not letting the left hip come closer to the armpit or closer to the floor. We're trying to lengthen pubic bone away from us. It's 5 more deep breaths. And then right foot comes to ground. If you lifted it, draw the left knee towards you. Take your hands or your strap behind your thigh. And then straighten your knee, bend your knee a couple of times, and then straighten to hold. Think about taking the outer left hip toward the end of the mat, not letting the left side of the body shorten. It's never worth it. Right leg can be straight or bent. If you can straighten completely, try a little bit of a bend. It'll likely benefit your knees and your lower back more so. Pointing and flexing the left ankle or remaining still. Both are useful. Inner upper arm to ceiling, outer upper arm to floor, pointing for circles if you're moving the ankle. Go the other way. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping, flex to hold. bending right knee, bending left knee, bringing both feet to the ground. And then from here, I'm gonna push in, if you have a block, you can use one here. If you don't have one, that's okay too. But if you do, put it between your thighs close to the pubic bone. If you don't, forget about it or use a book. Palms, shoulders, fingers pushing to ground or fingers pointing to ceiling. Those of us that have a strap and we want a bit of shoulder opening while we're at it, you can loop, and this is shoulder strength and flexibility, you can loop your strap like that over the front of the ankle, get a good grip with your hands. You can wrap it around the palm if you want, which is a little easier, or to strengthen the fingers more, you can just wrap your fingers around it, and then lengthening flesh of buttocks, lifting buttocks, lower back, mid back, upper back, lengthening the spine as you do so. You're very, very firmly engaging the glutes here. So the buttocks is very firmly engaged in order to support the lower back. We never want to back bend unless we're using the hips, the butt, the legs. The legs are very, very crucial with back bending. I always like to think that if I've done a really good back bending practice, and I've done a lot of them, that only my legs should be sore. I should never feel my back. And that's the truth. If you feel your spine afterward, especially the lower back, there's a good likelihood you did more than your body was prepared to do. Less is more. It's a very gradual practice. You can take up to 10 more breaths, but you can exit whenever you like. And I'll give you a few options in terms of resting now. Whenever you do come out as slow as you possibly can. When you are out, you can rest with the knees touching and the feet apart, the knees and feet apart. You can take the feet together and the knees wide. You can go a little side to side with bent knees, or you can straighten out your legs. And these are all good possibilities. Traditional, we tend to straighten out our legs. However, this may or may not be comfortable. You'll know. Taking up to 10 more breaths. When you decide it's enough, lower nice and slow, come out, and then give yourself one of those rests. All are good options. It depends on how you're feeling, right? Ideally, open your eyes, fix your gaze on one spot, and try to resist the urge to blink. See if you can take 3 breaths with the eyes open. And then blinking the eyes as slowly as you can 3 times, using as much control as is available to you. Great. And then bend your knees, roll to one side, push yourself up. And we're going to come onto our hands and knees or onto our blocks or onto our forearms. It depends on what you're working on and how your body's feeling today. So you might wrap your fingers around the top edge of a block. I recommend higher height to reduce what you're feeling in wrists in particular. Lower height is great if you want more. It's also a really good way to strengthen your fingers, which is really valuable, right? You can also be straight on your palms, hands further forward for less pressure, hands closer to you for more. And you want to think of really squeezing the mat with your fingers if you choose to have your hands on the ground. The last option would be elbows on the floor, right? And you could even have a couple of blocks between your palms if you wanted to. So from here, rounding the back, tucking the chin, pressing the floor away, lifting the gaze, lifting the sit bones, looking up. Spine rounding, chin tucking, pressing floor away, gaze lifting, sit bones lifting, looking up. And same idea if you're using the blocks or not. Spine rounding, and then chest lifting, sit bones lifting. And you continue at a pace that works for you. My experience is slower is better. And it is not important how much movement is created in the spine. What's relevant is how does it feel? Are you working with a moderate effort? 3 more. Wonderful. Neutral spine now. We want our feet to be pointed here. And we're looking to drag the heels away from us. So we've got a lift in the ankle, we've got a lift in those heels. And if you know your knees tend to go wide and your feet come closer together, block between thighs, block between heels if you like. Great way to go. And then circles with your hips. So Shelly, I recommend doing this. It'll be good for you. Or anyone else who's watching who's really hypermobile or has any lower back pain stuff, this is a really great way to work this. Unless you need your blocks under your wrists, in which case keep them there. But you could do the same thing on your elbows. That'd be another way to work it if your wrists were a troublesome area currently. Change direction now. And I also just recommend the block between heels, block between thighs connection if your legs aren't evenly strong. If some areas are stronger than others, which is basically true for all of us. Helps to even out the legs, create a lot more symmetrical engagement of the feet and ankles as well, which is generally makes your knees and your back much, much happier, let alone the hips. Ceasing the circles now. If you've got the blocks between the feet and thighs, remove them. And then from here, toes are tucked. You've got a good grip. You're bringing your hips towards your heels to the extent that suits you. You can stack your block under your forehead. This is option 1. Higher height is nice when we're dealing with more stress, so I highly recommend more height. And the firmness of support under the forehead, again, very good for the parasympathetic nerve system. So it tends to really calm us down a great deal when we've got this gentle pressure on the forehead. Especially if the skin of the forehead slides away from the bridge of the nose toward the crown of the head. It's very calming. Next option, arms extended. That feels great, go for it. If you want more, then you bear weight on the arms by lifting the knees. And this is not a good option unless you're not having any pain in your wrists at all. If you're kind of in between, you're like, oh, I would like the challenge of lifting my knees, but it's not appropriate for my wrists, then you can absolutely put your hands, or put a couple of blocks or a book between your hands, and then you could lift your knees here if you wanted to. That would be fine too. But you'd want to bend in your knees because it's going to be a lot harder for the spine and the shoulders. Up to you. Let's take 10 more breaths, regardless of the variation we've chosen. Think of lengthening hip creases away from armpits and vice versa. Inner upper arm rolling forward, outer upper arm rolling back. Maybe you can pull the shoulder blades apart. Maybe you can pull the sit bones apart. Maybe you can lift the sit bones. Maybe you can take the hips or the pelvis just a little bit more away from the shoulders, away from the rib cage. See what you can do. You don't want any pulling or tugging in your neck. Eventually, these inversions become lighter and lighter. And then we find ways to make them harder for ourselves. There's always more to learn. That is the best part. And if you're in a dog and it feels really great, I sometimes like to bend my elbows a little and then straighten my arms. Bend my elbows a little and then straighten them. All right, and then from here, you're gonna let your knees rest if you haven't yet. Your big toes are touching, your knees can be as wide as you like. You're either supporting your forehead with your stacked fists, with a block. Again, I recommend higher height of block than usual. If you need more still, you can feel free to extend your arms or pop up onto the fingertips with the head resting. Arms wider is going to provide less pressure in the shoulders. Lots of options though. Feel free to change it up whenever you need to. If you do get any pain, let me know. Feel the back of the body expanding as you breathe in. Feel the back of the body contracting as you breathe out. One more deep breath. Good, and then coming forward onto hands and knees or hands on blocks. Tucking toes, getting a good grip. And then stretching the right toes farther away than the heel. Think hips equal distance from the floor, followed by heel further away than toes. It can be nice to grab the baby toe edge of the foot and slide it away, maybe bend the knee a little as well. And then opposite side when you're ready, left toes farther away than heel, hips level, abdomen lifting. Heel further away than toes, elbows pulling apart, and then hooking baby toe edge of foot, sliding it away. Maybe you bend your knee, maybe you don't. Bending your knee will increase what you feel a lot, so you don't want to feel it in your knee, just in the ankle or foot, and then release it. All right, so I'm going to give you a few different ways for us to work on a lunging shape, or a warrior shape, depending on how you look at it. So you can be up on the tallest height of your blocks if you have blocks. If you don't have blocks, I will show you what to do in a mere moment. So you want your blocks as wide as your shoulders or as wide as your mat, your knees and ankles as wide as your hips. Your right foot either steps forward a little and then you scoot it forward, or you step forward. Another option would be to bring your right hand block on the inside a little and then step your right foot on the outside, having the knee and foot a little more at a 45 degree angle from your spine is nice. If you don't have blocks, then you come up to stand any which way you like. Then feet at hips distance, right foot a bit forward, left foot a bit back. You start with your feet relatively close together with both knees a bit bent, back heel a bit lifted, all right? And if that feels really good, you can progressively walk your front foot forward a little bit or your back foot back a little bit. But what you want is to keep control over your knees and your joints and no pain in your body. Bent in both knees, all right? So either or. If you're using the blocks, you can lift your left knee if that's available to you. Thinking right hip back, down and in, left hip lifting, abdomen lifting. Focus on one spot, or if it's comfortable, close your eyes. Try to use all of your fingers evenly. And if you're standing with no blocks, I recommend hands on hips or hands on thigh, right? Hands could be on thigh, hands could be on hips. Hands on thigh would be much, much more comfortable though, likely. Just like so, or like so. This can be a lunge too, right? It does not need to be a huge difference between the feet. Great balance work either way. 10 more breaths. Try to lift the abdomen. Try to lengthen the spine. Pull the elbows apart if those elbows are bendy. Outer shoulder going back, inner upper arm rolling forward. Pull the collarbones apart. See if you can fix your gaze for your last 5 breaths. And lunges grow on you, I promise. Good, and then lowering your knee, stepping your right foot back, knees and ankles at hips distance to step the left foot forward, either on the inside of the block, on the outside, whatever suits you. If you're standing, step that right foot back, rest for a moment, step the left foot forward. Hands can be on hips, hands can be on thigh. You're trying to lift your back heel a little and have a bend in both knees. All right, same shape, different way to get there. If you're on the ground, lifting your knee if it's available to you, drawing the left hip back, down and in, right inner groin lifts. I like to bend the right knee a little, or the back knee, in this case it's the right knee, a little bit as well. Especially if I'm bending in the joints, it's really useful. Try to fix your gaze. Resist the urge to fidget. You know, unless you have pain, of course. Do not force. We've got 10 more breaths at most. This does not mean we must it means we might. And a big part of yoga practice is becoming very well-versed in yourself, getting a degree in yourself in a way, noticing what's good for you and what's not, finding just the right amount of effort versus ease in practice and in life. And right knee lowering. If you lifted, send the hips back, the foot back. Now we'll take a rest. So you have lots of options for resting. You can either take the knees wide and the feet together for a child's pose, forehead supported by a block, or you can do a more active rest, so less restful. Blocks beside one another or hands outside of block would work great as well. I'll come sideways for this one. So you can see elbows are as wide as shoulders. You wrap your fingers and then you squeeze your blocks with your palms. You could even interlace your fingers. It would just give you less shoulder opening. You can do shoulder push-ups here, toes tucked. Rounding the upper back here is very useful. You don't want to bend into the lower back. Nope, don't do that. Lift the abdomen, lift the ribs. Once you've done some shoulder push-ups, find extension, no tension in your neck. You can go forward and back with the shoulders. You can either look toward the blocks or look toward the floor, depending on how it feels in your neck. Never force the neck. You could stack the shoulders and elbows to lift and lower knees. The closer the feet are to you, the closer the knees are to you, the harder that is likely to be. You could lift the knees and slide forward and back. And if you wanted more, just, let me know and I'll throw it in for next time. But chances are one of those will be plenty. 10 more breaths to stay still or to move based on what you need. When we're dealing with the degree of stress that we're all under these days, it's particularly important to pick and choose how you practice based on that day. So if you have more energy and you need to get it out or you need to transform it a little bit, then work harder. Other days, longer child's pose or shavasana in itself will be more than enough. It really depends. Learn to know yourself. That's the practice. Good, now when you're ready, we're gonna come forward. We're gonna do one more lunge. You can do this with blocks or you can do this standing. Either coming up to stand, stepping right foot forward, left foot a little back, a little bend in the knees, maybe hands on thigh, maybe hands on hips, maybe hands touching in front of you, something of that nature. You can even have your hands on a wall or on the back of a chair, depending on how you were feeling. If you're on the ground with the blocks, the knees and ankles are hips distance. The right foot steps forward either between the blocks or toward the outside of the right block. Up to you. Once the right foot is forward, you can choose to walk the left knee back farther if you feel you need to increase the effort and the stretch, or you can keep it as it is. The closer those knees are to one another, the easier it's going to be on your body. The further apart they are, the closer it is to a splits, really, so it's a lot more work. Left knee can stay or it can lift, depending on how you're feeling. And again, a little bend in your knee is useful. If you straighten it completely, and you can straighten it completely, chances are you need to bend it a bit. Think right hip back, down and in, lift that left side of pelvis, kick the right shin forward. And you can stay or you can add a twist this time if you like. Great for the respiratory and immune systems, as much twisting as we can manage. If you choose to, left hand block can come a little closer to center. Actually, I'm gonna do a different one, I've changed my mind. If you're gonna twist, you're gonna turn your right foot out a little bit, just like so. Right toes and knee pointing out, and then your right hand will come to your right knee if you want more, and then you can start to stack the shoulders. Left-hand block can come closer to center depending on how it feels. You can extend the right arm if you like. Drawing that right femur back down and in toward the hip socket. Hand could be at the base of the skull, hand could be on the shoulder, arm could be extended, hand could be on the knee or the hip. Whatever you select, make sure it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, do less. Experiment, see what suits you today. There's a strong likelihood that every day is going to be even more different than usual. There'll be even more fluctuation in the mind and in the body than we're used to. Let's take up to 10 more breaths. Do not force. Regular old static lunge has immense benefits, immense. Good, and then when you're ready to, hands are on blocks if you brought one up. You're gonna point your right foot and knee forward. You'll lower the left knee, bringing the left hand block more to the left if you brought it closer. And then send your hips back, bring your foot back. If you're standing, swap which foot is forward. Feet and knees at hips distance, left foot forward, either directly through the blocks or toward the outside. And then I'm gonna get you to turn that left foot out just a little bit, knees and toes pointing out. Right hand block can come a little closer to center if you want to twist. Otherwise, you stay exactly as you are and you hang out, right knee up or down. If you're going for the twist, you can turn that left foot out a little bit. You can bring your left hand block on the inside of the foot if it's more comfortable. Left hand can come to the knee. Fingers wrap around the knee. You're drawing the left hip back, down and in, the right hip higher to level out the pelvis. Elbows are pulling apart, especially if you're bending in that area. Kicking that left shin forward, lifting that right hip higher. Now you can stay, or you have many, many options. If it feels like the right hand block's too wide, you bring it closer and you want it to be under that shoulder or a bit ahead of the shoulder. Your left hand can stay on the knee, it can come to your hip. You could bring your left hand to your shoulder and reach with the elbow. You could bring the hand to the base of the skull, kind of like a headstand arm if you're a headstander. You can extend the arm, trying not to let it go farther back, but stacking over the shoulders if you can. It's up to you. Do not force, do not strain. Every variation has value. This lunge, the static lunge, it builds into any kind of twist you like or any other standing pose. 8 more breaths. Pull those shoulder blades apart, pull the elbows apart, lengthen the rib cage. Do not force. Good, now lowering your hands, making sure your left foot and knee are pointing forward. Lower the right knee if it was up, send the hips back, bring your foot back. Knees and ankles at hips distance apart, and then a couple of options. I'll give you 3 actually. So you can come do your, what I often call pinch a prep, or preparation to bear weight on the forearms, so you can squeeze blocks between your hands, interlace your fingers, or have a book between your hands. Lift the abdomen and the ribs and then slide forward and back, or lift the knees to slide forward and back, or go up and down with the knees. Child's pose is a fantastic option as well. Toes tucked puppy pose is a great option too. Ears between shoulders for that one. So all of those are good possibilities. If you'd love a dog, that would be great too, of course. 10 more breaths to move or to be still. Remembering if you're going for a child's pose option, forehead support is very, very valuable these days. Very calming in the nervous system. Good, and then from here, let's come on to our hands and knees. Have the knees and ankles and hips distance apart. Slide the right toes away, the heel away, the baby toe edge of the foot away. And then the left toes away, the heel away, the baby toe edge of the foot away. And then release it. So we're gonna come up to stand to work on one more standing pose here. So walk your fingers to your knees, lift your knees. Walk your fingers to your feet, lift your hips. Bring your hands to your hips, push into your feet and come up. And we're gonna work on a posture called pyramid pose. I'll show you from the front and the side. Feet and hips distance apart. Right foot comes forward. Left toes point out slightly, about 45 at the most. You're drawing your right hip back. You're lifting your abdomen. You're bending your knees a little bit or a lot. And then we squeeze our elbows towards one another and we fold forward. And we try to keep our shoulders level. All right, so that's from the front. From the side, feet a short distance apart, right foot forward, left toes turn out a little, right hip draws back, abdomen lifts, chest lifts, we bend our knees, we keep the hips level, we squeeze our elbows, we fold forward a little. And we're keeping those hips level. Good, that's it. And they call this one pyramid or Parsvottanasana. Chest lifting, abdomen lifting. You're trying to lengthen the rib cage and the abdomen away from the pelvis. Ten more breaths. And then when you're ready to come up, bend your knees generously, push into your feet, come up gradually, bend your knees again, step forward, rest. All right, when you're ready to do so, we'll do the second side, feet at hips distance apart, left foot forward, hands on hips, elbows squeeze towards one another, right foot turns out a little. Inner edge of that left foot is nice and straight. You're drawing the left hip back, right hip forward till the hips are level. Abdomen lifting, chest lifting, push into the outer right foot, bend your knees a little. Lift the abdomen and ribs to come forward. Make sure there's a little bend in the knees. Chest lifting, abdomen lifting, keep the shoulders level. Do not be surprised if one side is significantly different than the other. They call this, in English, often intense side stretch instead of pyramid, because it tends to work the sides of the body very effectively in order to create stability in the hips and lower back. And you can always play around with lifting your toes if it's a really comfortable one for you. Think of pulling the femurs into the hip sockets, thinking calf to shin, front of the thigh to the back of the thigh, lifting the outer abdomen up. So like right about here. Whoop. 8 more breaths. You want to zip up the abdomen and the ribs here. Elbows squeeze towards one another. Stretching the front of the chest while you're here. Good, and then make your way up gradually. Bend your knees a lot in order to do so. Once you're up, step forward, rest. Great. All right, I think we're gonna look at a wide, we're gonna do one last standing posture here. So, stepping into the center of the mat, step the right foot out, step the left foot out, have the outer edges of the feet parallel, spread your toes broadly. Hands on hips, bend your knees, pull the thighs apart, squeeze the thighs together, find neutral thighs. I like to bend my knees quite a bit. You could lift your toes if you wanted to. Lift the shoulders, broaden the chest, and then start to fold forward gradually. Either keep your hands on your hips or bring your elbows to the top of the thigh or the part of the thigh that's just above the knee, and then lengthen the rib cage away from the pelvis. And it's as though you're taking the armpit area and lengthening it away from the hip crease area. So you're trying to take this space and this space as far away from one another as you can without crowding the neck. And you want the fingertips touching like this, so that you're pressing the fingertips together, you're pulling the palms apart, you've got a slight bend in all the knuckles, elbows are squeezing towards one another to lengthen the rib cage. Think inner elbow is squeezing an imaginary block. Think weight even in toes and heels, weight even in big toe and baby toe edge of foot, even in right foot versus left. Five more deep breaths. Resist the urge to fidget. When you're ready to exit, bring your hands to your hips, bend your knees more, push into your feet, come up slowly. Once you're all the way up, bend your knees, step the right foot in, the left foot in, rest. Palms face forward, chest lifts, close your eyes. Bend your knees as much as you like. Feet together will be harder, feet apart will be easier. Good, and then from here we're gonna come down to the mat or to a malasana. You can bend your knees and come straight to one. If that happens to work for you, go for it. Otherwise, there's a good chance you'll wanna sit on a block. Come down any which way you like. We're gonna do a little bit of Achilles and toe work here. If you've been doing classes with me for a bit, I know this, we do this a lot, but it's really, really good for you. You can have your hands on your knees, your hands behind you, lifting heels, lifting toes, lifting heels, lifting toes, just going back and forth. And you can do the same thing, hovering with your hands on the ground or with your hands not on the ground, depending on how you're feeling and how much challenge it is for you. Do what suits you, rest anytime. Let's take 10 more breaths. Heels up, heels down, toes up, toes down. Let's go heels up a third of the way, 2/3 of the way, all the way. Down a third of the way, 2/3 of the way, all the way. Toes up, big toes down, all the other toes down. Try to keep the big toes down as you lift all the other toes up. And then all the toes come down, lift the heels a third of the way, 2/3 of the way, all the way. Lower them a third of the way, 2/3 of the way, all the way. Lift all of the toes, lower the big toes, lift the big toes, lower all the other toes, lift all the toes, rest all the toes. Let's come out of our malasana or squat now. You can bring your hands in front of you to lower down. You can bring one hand behind you, other hand behind you to lower down. If you're on height, bring your feet further forward to lower off of that height. And then from here, extend the legs, take the hands behind you, point and flex. If you're looking for more of a shoulder stretch here, you can take the hands beside you, slide them back, and bend your elbows to point and flex. Elbows squeeze together, pull apart so they're as wide as your shoulders. It's up to you. And some circles. Go the other way. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Flexing, curling, pointing, flipping. Flexing your feet. Now from here, a couple of twist options. I'll give you 3 options. First option would be on your back. It would look like this. You'd come down nice and slow. You'd take the arms wide. You'd take the hips to the right, the knees to the left. Right leg on top or right leg crossed. You can support the hips on the left side as much as you like. Second option, seated, legs extended, right knee bending, left hand to knee, right hand behind, chest lifting, abdomen lifting, dragging left hip to you as you twist to the right. Third option, bend your knees, tuck left foot under, right foot over, and twist to the right. Again, you decide what suits you. If this last one is what you're aiming for, you must have both hips completely on the floor and absolutely no pain in knees or back whatsoever. Otherwise, don't bother. Stick with one of the first 2 options. They will serve you very well. Fix your gaze or close your eyes, pull the elbows apart, lengthen the hip creases away from the armpits, abdomen and ribs engaged, ankles flexed. Concentrate on your breathing. Ten more deep breaths. Lungs expanding, lungs contracting. And unwinding. And then from here, if you're on your back, come back to center, switch the crossing of the legs, or if the legs are stacking, bringing them to the other side, and make sure you move your hips in between. If you're seated, extending the legs, taking the hands behind you, lift and lengthen the spine, and then bend the left knee, right hand to left knee, left hand behind you, lengthening rib cage away from pelvis as you twist toward your left. Hand can be on knee, forearm. You decide what suits you. Dragging right heel back, lengthening rib cage and hip creases away from armpits and vice versa. Neutral neck, neutral shoulders as you twist. Fix your gaze or close your eyes. Elbows pulling apart. If you're seated, then I like to think of them as a bit of an outrigger, that I'm reaching the elbows away from one another. Literally, if I'm on the ground, then I think of pushing my elbows and my shoulders toward the floor, lifting the armpit chest, and reaching those elbows away from one another. And it's fine if the back of the hand comes away from the ground a bit. Completely normal. Most humans, that's the case. Unless you had a especially unusual joint structure. 5 more deep breaths. Unwinding nice and slow, lifting and lengthening to release the legs. If you're on the back, firing up the legs, the arms, slowly coming back to center. And then 2 options. If you're on your back, a happy baby. I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. If you're seated, feet together, knees apart. We don't want our heels as close to us as possible for this one. Our heels are a little farther away, so we've got about a 90-degree angle knee, about a box shape made by the bend in the knee here. If you have a couple of blocks, you can stack them and rest the forehead. Sometimes we stack them and rest the elbows and then the forehead like this, which I highly recommend. I'll show you that from the side too. It's a really nice way to get the forehead support. Just like so. And you can give yourself more and more height depending, right? On what's comfortable for your spine and your hips. And the same position is great on our back, of course. If you happen to be someone who owns a bolster, you could put it on the feet and do the same connection. It's rather lovely. If you don't know what happy baby looks like, you're drawing the thighs to you. Your inner thighs are just outside the ribs. Your hands are behind the thighs. You can move side to side. You can make circles. You can stay still. You can kick into the feet a bit. Go for the outer ankle or outer foot if that's reasonable. Or you stay still. And hang behind the thigh. 10 more breaths either way. Feel the back of the body expanding as you breathe in. Feel the back of the body contracting as you breathe out. If your mind wanders, bringing your attention back to the movement of your breathing. Good, and then when you're ready, very slowly, very gradually, if you're in the seated position especially, you don't want to change the blood pressure too much. Make your way up and out, draw those knees together if you haven't yet, give them a little hug. I like to just kind of wrap myself around my legs, maybe rest my head on my forearms. If I'm on the ground, I hug the legs toward me, I give them a squeeze. And then when you feel like that is sufficient, 2 options. You can take Shavasana or you can take legs up the wall. Both are very good restorative positions to finish a practice with. And I highly recommend both positions. And I'll talk you through the resting position, and then I will leave you to your Shavasana for today. And I highly recommend at least 10 minutes of Shavasana. However, if you can manage 15 minutes or perhaps even 20 minutes, that would be absolutely ideal. I would say 15 is like that absolute sweet spot if you can manage it. More is better if possible. And usually less than 10, not as effective. So it's great to give yourself that extra time to settle in. So once you found your way onto your back, either with the legs up the wall or up on a bolster or flat on your back with the legs flat on the ground, whatever you like, just make sure you're comfortable and you don't feel the urge to fidget there. Extending the arms, you can clench and relax the palms as much as you like, and perhaps lengthening the spine or the arms away from the shoulders slightly. You can lengthen the spine or lengthen the neck if that feels available to you. You can clench and release the toes as well as the fingers if you find it useful. And then when you are ready to do so, becoming as still as you can be, resisting the urge to fidget and adjust, focusing on your body, your breathing from the inside, concentrating on being still. And I'll leave you here for now. Please enjoy your Shavasana, and I look forward to seeing you next time.